Hello, and welcome to the Rossaround Backstage Podcast, talking with artists, technicians, musicians, producers, directors, and all the interesting and talented people that make it all happen for you.
Okay, so let's get back to where you were.
Yes.
Sleeping under the console, making a remark. Now you're going to get fired almost, but you don't. Get vindicated.
Yeah.
What happens next?
I
must have moved on to somewhere else. I
did. I went to with my work with Obies was a couple of 3 more shows after that with that particular company and that particular fixture. Being in California a lot at that point allowed me to kind of meet other people and bump into some stuff. And I met a guy named Barry Claxton, and Barry was he was the labor guru, for lack of a better term. Barry had a title. I'm sure he officially was something, but I didn't know. But Barry, when you wanted to go to work for LSD, you had to go through Barry. Your resume went across his desk. And then he'd call people as he needed them to. Barry he is a Philly guy. And Barry was one of those guys of, I'd like to go to work for your company. And he got my resume, he looked at what he saw, and he was like, oh, LD for Salt and Pepper, Obies, looks like he's had some background. Sure, let's give him a shot. And Barry put me on a BMG gig first. a crew chief by the name of Katie Tires. And Katie, not Katie Tires, God, what was Katie's last name? Katie Marks. Katie was super coordinated, really good about what I was saying before about being good with people as far as keeping the client at bay. But we walked into a ballroom down in, where was it? Just south of L.A., hotel ballroom, big convention thing, and the whole rig had to change. Something had been wrong about the site survey. Something had gone terribly wrong with the way that we were supposed to be able to put this up, and everything had to change at the last minute. Katie kept her cool, and that was cool. That was great. She was like, okay, we need to do this. And we jumped into it, and we got it done, and it worked well. And right after that, Barry called me up, and he was like, I heard you didn't freak. I was like, didn't know I was supposed to. He was like, cool. I got a Kodak thing for you. Okay, cool. Go do a Kodak thing. Hey, I got this Diana Ross thing for you. Go do the Diana Ross thing. Everything that Barry sent me on, without me really knowing about it, was a great moment of, you're going to learn even more about this industry, whether you want to or not.
So you weren't the LD on these gigs; you were a part of the crew.
I was an electrician. I was, I was the guy who plugged it in. If I got lucky to get behind a desk, I was, a programmer. And then Barry sent me out on. It was what the hell that we went out on. Was fun. But it was one that I realized I gotta keep going from here. Some gig that I did, and I realized I just didn't want to keep being the tech guy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he sensed that. And this was about late '99, and Barry said, "Hey, there's this guy who needs a guy, and I'm going to put you out on this." And I was like, sure, what kind of music is it? And he says, it's soul music. And he didn't say rap, and he didn't say hip-hop, and he just said, it's soul. And I said, sure. And it turned out to be D'Angelo. It was his first big tour, and it was design the system, and then you get to go out and be the LD. You will have to tech. And I was like, okay, how hard could it be, right? It wasn't hard. It was a really complicated design.
But you designed it.
I designed it. So I knew where all the bones were buried. Yeah. I knew how it was going to work. And he sent me out with a new guy, Jim Keegan. but Jim was technically, anal. So Jim was like, it wires this way and it goes this way and it does this. And I was like, cool, badass. So this guy's got that end down, and I can go worry about the creative end, and all we have to do is just build the structure every day. And it was the Voodoo tour, and it was the superstar team on stage with him. He had Questlove was his drummer. He had Pino Palladino on bass. Spanky and Norris were guitarists on this thing. Anthony Hamilton was one of his backup singers. Shelby Johnson was the other. It was pretty much the most stellar lineup that you could have for music. I don't even want to say that genre of music, but for music at the time. And it wasn't like anything else that was out there. It wasn't rap. It was not hip hop. It had a flow. It really truly was soul music in the Marvin Gaye, Al Green flavor, but a whole brand new twist to it, because Dee was just magical, and still to this day is in his head. We took the Voodoo tour out and toured it around the world. We went Europe, we went South America, we did all of the United States a couple of times. It was hitting. It was awesome, and it was just the best place to be. This is where I got to truly become theatrical, because his show was not your traditional make it red, make it blue, hey kind of show. His show really had a direction. It had a front, a middle, and an end. And it allowed me to become an artist with this stuff. I was honored by that one, because we didn't know it was going to be as big as it turned out to be, and it turned out to be huge. It was monstrously influential for the music industry. It was even more so for me, because by doing that particular show, everybody wanted me to be able to do their show. And I went directly from the Voodoo tour, which we thought, oh, okay, well, we're doing the last show here in South America, and we're getting ready to go to Japan, and this is going to be awesome, and we're going to just go rolling off into the sunset of being able to do shows every year with this guy, to 12 years later, he did his next tour.
Oh, wow. Wow.
He hadn't released a record in those 12 years either, even though he had a deal with the company to be able to, they expected a record in 2 years. He didn't do another show for 12.
Wow.
I remember we were in, I think it was Sao Paulo, and MTV Brazil was shooting the show live, broadcasting across the nation. And I remember I had a playback monitor at front of house, and I'm doing the show, and they didn't know the show. They hadn't seen it. It was the first time we were in Brazil. And Devil's Pie is the start of this show. And D'Angelo, something most people don't know about him is he has a really horrible case of stage fright until he's on stage. But up to the point of getting him to stage is kind of like, you need to put chains around him and drag him from wherever he is to wherever he gets to the wing of the stage. And then after you get him on there, he won't come off. And so we start the Devil's Pie drone, and the horns are going, and Spanky is doing the little guitar part, and MTV is cameras on what is a black stage with a small green ballyhoo going on, thinking the show is just going to start, and it went for like 5 minutes. And they had no idea. And I'm watching the jibs go around, and I'm like, they can't figure out where to point the cameras at, because there's no light anywhere. But then the show truly starts, and everybody comes on in the black, and Dee's in his position, and he starts the line, and it is a black start. And the drop comes, and everything lights up for the first time. And I'm standing in this room, and the hair on my neck still to this day stands up, because of how that show just went insanely off the chain. So good. so great being broadcast for a nation who is losing their minds because of this. And then on top of it all, like I said, he did not want to get off stage. So, MTV's got this, scheduled for a 2-hour slot in live prime time. I think we were at 2:25, 2:30, and MTV's like, do we cut away? What do we do? Wow. And they're like, no, just leave it. Just let it go. Just let this one go, because this is history in the making here. That was also Frankie Knuckles was sitting in for Questlove on drums. Questo had a Roots thing, and he had to do it. And so Frankie comes in, and and that was when we discovered Red Bull. It wasn't in the U.S. yet. And the cute little cans, and Frankie's backstage, and, ooh, look, this stuff tastes good. And he downs a Red Bull. Well, I want another one of those. This is a small can. And he does another can, and he does a third can of Red Bull and gets on stage. And he's the drummer. And about halfway through the show, I'm noticing the tempo has just gotten like, what the hell's going on? And then, what was it? Pino Palladino's on bass, and Pino is pocket for days. And when Pino and Questlove played together, it is that ultimate groove. Frankie is going at time and a half at this point, and increasing. And I could see it on the camera, and Pino turns to Frankie and goes, "What the fuck are you doing?" And Frankie's looking, and you could see the terror in his face. He's like, "I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on."
He's jacked up.
Totally jacked up on Red Bull, and has zero idea why. He's just like, I can't play slower. So
time for that metronome.
Well, then the funny thing is, D runs with it. So songs like Lady and the end of the show are upbeat, crazy, fast songs that need a quicker tempo, and we got it, but it just went way faster than we expected it to. And it's just like da, 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 da. But then he ends with Untitled, which is him sitting down at the piano. And it just kind of ends, and it has great swell, and it goes away really pretty, and it's just one of those things where the song is a great end of the night. Mm-hmm. It was one of I could tell that was a song that was made for a sexual encounter. That was the one that everybody was having on in their bedrooms when they were having sex in the early 2000s. It was like, yeah, that D'Angelo, he's getting me laid. But it was a great way to end the show, and it also took it all down. It was like the cigarette after sex.
Yeah. No, I've been involved in shows that end like that with a ballad, and it is a good way to end a show sometimes. Mm-hmm. So then what happened after D'Angelo?
My phone rang off the hook, and I got hooked up. I connected with Erykah Badu, and Erykah Badu turned out to be about 13 years of my life.
Wow, that's a big gig.
It was a big gig, and it was a big working gig. It was a consistent thing. It's when my income went from this level to, that level. There was money there, and there was money to be made, and it was, we want to design. We want, come up with the concept. Let's go. And she did. She just went. She had ideas. It was Mama's Gun, and all the albums from that point forward, we did. Her visual was my job.
Did you change the show every year?
I changed the show as constantly as I could. Okay. As much as I could. I kept adding stuff. I kept changing things. I changed color, pattern, placement on stage when I could. There was a lot of times when we would have some consistency. We would have the MD keyboard player downstage right, because that was her natural flow to be able to give a sign to him that we were changing. And one of the things about Erykah's show is in those days, it was truly on the fly. She had a pretty good enough catalog, and these were the cats from Dallas and Philly that she played with, that she could basically say, I want to change up to this song, and we all know it, and I know you do, so I'm not going to stall to try. You just find your transition, and she give that heads up to the MD. Some of it would be because she had a little CDJ on a toys table next to her, and the CDJ would allow her to be able to pick a track and be able to scratch her way through it, and they would know by the scratch that she played where she wanted to go. So it was kind of like really weird, but really good musicians. And because of that, I would know where we were going to go. So I could get set up for a song that wasn't even programmed, but I knew she was going here. Okay, good. I've got this.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of shows would take place on the fly, and there were times when, you know, her and I would talk afterwards, and she would be like, "How did you know where I was going?" I said, "Because I'm paying attention." And she said, "I know you're paying attention. How did you know?" And I said, "Because we're built like this. You and I think like this. This is how when you think, I think that way. When I think, you think that way. You're what I need you to be." She had these great poses. She would look like an Urte painting, where she would take these long, lean poses and extend out. She had dance background from when she was young, but she would take these great poses that would allow me to do the theatrical lighting of cutting in from the back or cutting in from the sides. It would just look like a moment. And we were able to make that happen night after night after night, but it was so organic that it looked like we just came up with it. And sometimes we did. But her and I were just on that sync where we could actually do that. Erica was tough to work with because Erica was another... As much as we worked, there were times when we worked twice as hard to get to the same result. And it was difficult because she was never a clock person. She was never on time for any of our stuff. I think some of the events themselves suffered because we never quite got the steam up. You know, with D, it was hard to get them on the stage, but once we got them, it wouldn't come off, and it was fine. But with E, it was difficult to get her on the stage, period. And because we couldn't get her on the stage, the clock started ticking. You know, so a 2-hour scheduled show could, you know, turn out to be, 50 minutes because she burned an hour on the front end.
She'd just come late?
She would just get there late. Or she'd be in her dressing room and just trying to get her chi together or something. Something would happen, and we just never got going on time. The band was really good at they would harp. You know, we get them on stage for the promoter purposes of we have to get them on stage. We have to start the show right now or else we're going to fucking take a hit. And we'd start the band, and then they'd play, and they'd just loop the same 16. And they'd play until she walked out. And sometimes they got to that point where she didn't come out for 30 or 40 minutes.
Oh.
And they didn't change up.
Wow.
And that sucked for everybody because it was like after a while we were all like, what's going on here? You know, and me and the front of house guy would try to think, well, do we just leave? Leave everything set the way it is and kind of sneak away because we're not sure if we're going to do this show or not. Erica was a big one. Maxwell was a big one. Music Soul Child was a big one. I pretty much picked up almost everything in the neo-soul genre right after the D'Angelo run. It was all going across my desk before. And if it's in my schedule, it fit in my schedule. If it didn't, it went somewhere else. But for the most part, I did almost every major neo-soul act from 2000 until I think it was about 2009. They all came across my desk. Jill Scott, who I love to this day. Jill she is such a wonderfully intelligent woman, and she makes me smile with the way that she presents her music to her audience. She gives it with a lot of love, which made her show coming from my end different than a show that I would do with, say, Erica or somebody like that. She was very much a woman who spoke from her heart. Her songs were written based on love experiences mostly, sexual experiences, hurt experiences, things like that. And it made for a lot of fun to light a moment in her life. When we first met, I remember I got the call and they were like, well, she'd like to meet you. And I was like, okay, well, how do you know? They're like, fly to Philly. She wants to meet you. And we'll send you home. I was like, okay, cool. So I took the morning flight, landed in Philly early afternoon, got in the car, went to her apartment, walked in, and this woman has some beautiful art on her walls. I mean, some original big dollar, like, ooh, is that a real one? She has a love for art and an appreciation for it. And so talking to her, and we talked a bit about a concept, and she was like, great, looking forward to working with you. And they were like, okay, cool, we'll send you back. And I was like, okay.
I guess I got the job then.
I got the job, and I headed back to Philly Airport and got back on a plane, and I was home that night. So
how long did you work for Jill?
Jill was, I think we were together for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a pretty good chunk of time.
Another good run, yeah.
Yeah, I've had some really good runs. Alan is another one. Alan, we're in year 15, I think, right now.
So is that kind of sum up most of the artists that you worked with then before Alan?
Those were the artists that actually Alan fell in the middle of that gap. Alan fell in, I think it was 2003, 2004 when I went to work for Alan.
So I should probably, tell the listeners that as you talk about working for people for 10 years, that doesn't mean that you worked steady for them for 10 years. You're probably doing other people in between. While you're working for Jill for 10 years, you're still picking up other stuff because they're not going to tour for 12 months normally. So they're going to tour for 3 months or 4 months, and in between you're going to be doing other stuff too.
And hope that the schedules align. And a lot of times it did. A lot of times my schedules were just perfect, and I'd drop out of one and drop right into the other. But it also helped kind of formulate my design company, because at that point I was realizing I can only be so many places at one time.
Right.
And I need to get some help out here. I need to get some people who are actually going to be able to, take what I design and be able to go and make sure it runs the way it's supposed to run. So I had people on Erica. I had some people here on Alan. I had some people out on other acts that I was previously occupied where I couldn't do it. It worked out well sometimes, and it didn't work out so well some other times. There was a kid out of Baltimore who I had been asked by his uncle to do a favor. He really wants to be in the business. Can you get him something? And we talked, and he looked like he was going to be a good fit for Erica, and I put him out on the Erica tour, and he was not. He had some demons. He had a lot of demons, and they came out while he was on the road. And the road is really difficult. A lot of people don't think they think it's, hanging out in VIP and flying on G8s and being, the rock star kind of world where you get to be, just like the celebrities you see on TV. And it's not that. And a lot of people get burnt up way quicker if they've already got problems. And this kid did. And I remember I got the phone call. They were in Russia, and they were like, you need to replace him now. Right now. And I'm like, all right. And they were putting him on a plane. They were sending him home. He burnt to a crisp, just, and then his life, proceeded to go even further down a rabbit hole after that. And I had to cut him loose, and it was like, crap. And then you start to have to try to figure out, from a businessman's standpoint, crap, now who do I fill that hole with? And I've been lucky enough over the years to have met some pretty good guys who have been able to say, oh yeah, okay, I got this, I can jump in for you. But schedules for the really good guys are harder than,
of course,
they've ever been
busy.
Everybody wants to be busy, and the good guys are going to be more busy than the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
So, I've encountered so many ups and downs with the business as far as the quality of artists that I get to work with. I think the biggest variable in this business has always been the people. You're now talking about personalities. You're now talking about ego. You're now talking about different things that people do not take into account when they are all thinking the music's great. Oh, the music's fantastic, and they don't stop and think about what it takes to get to that music era. Like I said, D'Angelo, it was 12 years between tours and almost 15 years between albums.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing out there. I loved having all the board tapes and the sound check tapes from different periods of time when we were on the road with him, because it was like, ooh, look, this is a true D'Angelo moment that nobody else has.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has heard this song, including the record label.
Right.
And I still have that stuff in archives. It's great. But there was like I was production manager for Foreigner in that gap of time. I went out with them on their 25th anniversary tour as a PMLD. I was brought in by Alex Reardon to be the replacement LD at another gig, and he was just like, "Come on and be on the tour." Not a big deal for me. I knew Foreigner music; it was all good. Him and John Godesky, the production manager, were not seeing eye to eye, and that was one of the reasons he wanted to leave. And on the last day he was supposed to be there, him and John got into a fight on the bus that became a true knockdown, drag-out fight. And it went from the bunk area to the front lounge, down the steps, into the parking lot, across the street, into the parking lot of the bar. The fight was really a fight. Alex was leaving, and he was gone, and John had his ass kicked, and he was gone. And the guys in the crew came, and I was sitting in the back lounge because I was like, I don't know these guys. I'm not going to get involved in this fight. And the guys in the crew came in the back lounge and just like, "You're the new guy, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And it's like, "You're the production manager now, too." And I was like, "What? Oh, okay. And your name is?"
Oh, wow.
But then, we had 3 days off, and the first 3 dates were Vegas, Lake Havasu, fly to Sturgis on a private jet, and then a fly back to L.A. On same private to do a television show. And that was my first 4 gigs with them. And none of the travel had been arranged. Nothing had been advanced. Godesky didn't have his shit together. He was more worried about something else in his world. And I remember being handed all this, and I had a day and a half to sit down in my hotel room in Vegas and just kind of laid out the tour. And I built up all the notes I could possibly do and started to talk to people and arrange for a plane and talk to the folks at Sturgis and all this other stuff. And Mick wanted to ride a motorcycle on stage, so we made sure we got him a motorcycle. All this shit happened, and it went off without a hitch.
No.
And
good for you.
Oh, lucky for me.
Yeah.
Lucky for me. And in fact, that was the tour. At the end of the run, we ended in Connecticut, and we had the band and crew dinner after the show. Mick's brother was a tour manager, and he called me up and he says, "Where you at?" And I said, "I'm finishing up the last of the accounting." He said, "Well, come down there. Come in." I was like, "Okay, I'll be down in a second." And I knocked out a spreadsheet, and I put together a thing, and I put the leftover float in an envelope and took it down, and I sat down, and they had a seat next to me, and it was Lou and Mick, and we were there, right there at the table, and I handed Mick's brother, who was the tour manager, an envelope, and he's like, "What's this?" And I was like, "It's my leftover float." And Lou looked at me, and he was like, "What do you mean leftover float? I've been doing this for 25 years. We've never gotten money back at the end of the tour."
Oh, really? Wow.
I was like, "Sorry, dude, the receipts were balanced. Here's what's left over from the money." And he was like, "Where were you 25 years ago?" And I was like, 25 years ago, I was already doing this. Somebody should have called me.
Wow.
So
then it was Alan? Then you got involved with Alan?
I did, yeah. And
so how did that happen? How'd you get started with Alan? Who called?
Our rigger on D'Angelo was a kid named Johnny Blaze. And Johnny lived in Nashville, and he lived with a guy named Chuck Beckler. And Chuck was and has become stage manager extraordinaire. I mean, he is on a plane constantly. He was stage manager for Stones.
Wow.
Yeah.
Big time.
Big time. But he was the production manager for Alan. Chuck said, "You know any lighting guys?" And Johnny's like, "Oh, man, I just worked at this great lighting guy, this Martin Thomas guy." Chuck called me up and said, "Hey, Alan Parsons, we were looking for an LD. You want to come up and do a show? I was like, sure. Jackpot, Nevada. And that was 2000, I think it was 2004. That's the first file I remember having for Alan. So, yeah, so we're 14 years now in this. And I flew in to, the connection flight was in Salt Lake. And this is when Alan was the New York band. So it was 4 musicians on stage, PJ Olson and Alan. It was just the 6 of us on this run.
Wow.
This is old days. And the New York band, the bass player, John Montagna, his girlfriend lived in Tucson. So we had similar flights that put us into Salt Lake at the same time on 2 different airlines, but when we landed in Salt Lake or Connect to go to Jackpot or wherever we were off to, put us in the airport at the same time. And I didn't know any of these guys from Adam. You know, I know what Alan Parsons looked like, you know, from iRobot album 20-some-odd years ago, but I had no idea what, you know, he looked like today or any of the other guys. Except I found all these guys holding guitars. So I just kind of gravitated towards the guys, and I was like, Alan Parsons? Hell yeah. New York? Oh, yeah, okay. Instantaneous connection. It was just like chat, blah, blah, blah. You know, Tucson? Oh, and immediately John was, you know, my girlfriend lives in Tucson, her father lives there, blah, 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 blah. Good, you know, so we connected before we even got off the plane. Got to checked in the hotel, and then it was, you know, Chuck called and said, everybody's meeting down the bar. Oh, surprise.
Yeah.
And I come down to the bar, and, you know, obviously Alan and Lisa don't know me. And I walk in the bar, and Alan sees me, and you know, curly-haired, darker complexion, kind of looked and was like, oh. Kind of thinking, does he even know who this music is or who I am or what's going on? Yeah, okay. And I talked to him for a little bit, and I could tell he was unsure. I really did. He sounded like this is just going to be a case of, let's get through this. We're still looking for a lighting guy. Mm-hmm. And it was a double show for 2 days. So in other words, we were doing an early show and late show for 2 days in a row. And the first show was good. It wasn't horrible. I kind of focused. I did know the music. I had been listening to Alan Parsons for a long time. I did know what it was supposed to sound like. The band really absolutely was on target with it because the New York band also all played together as a band whenever they weren't working with Alan. So they had everything down. This is kind of like the back in the days with the showbiz guys I was talking about. They knew how to play shit. So, you know, these guys knew how to be in pocket, and Alan was just kind of more of the musical director. And when he changed stuff up, they all knew to change, you know. And PJ was the front man, and he was, you know, the whirling dervish as he still is. And it was a great show. So first show out of the box, and I figured out, oh, there's an accent there. Ah, okay, that's the timing for this one now. It's not the same way as it is on the record. Oh, okay, cool. Second show comes up, and I'm in pocket, you know. I know where the things do drop. I know where the things fall. I'm good to go. I'm having a good old show. And I remember Lisa coming up, and she says, how do you know all this stuff? I was like, because it's great music. And she left me alone for the rest of the night. And I came downstairs after the show was over with, and Alan and Lisa were like, you're really good at this. The show felt really great on stage. And I was like, it'll get better. And it's, oddly enough, it has. You know, over all the years, it's just gotten better and better.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I love them as people. They are wonderful people. Having an opportunity to do him and light that stuff, it's iconic. You know, I did an article for a magazine about this show, and that's the word I used, was iconic. It is. This is music that has, you know, whether you know it or not, it goes through a couple of generations of people who know who this is. And if you didn't know the music, you know who he is from what he's done. Yeah. So, yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Well, and Alan Parsons' show is really, I mean, of course the music is great, but it really needs to be a full 360-degree experience.
It does.
It's got to have great musicians. It's got to have great sound, and it's got to have great lights. And when you have all that together, it's fantastic. It's wonderful, especially on the days. Well, I've been with you on a lot of shows where sometimes you don't have everything that you want, and then other days you have everything you want. And when you have even close to everything you want, it's always just amazing. I've complimented you over and over again, because it's so great. Working with you is just wonderful. It's like a movie. It's just great, and the lighting is so important. And like even yesterday, daytime show outdoors. I'm not, that's not the experience. I mean, it's still good. You get to still hear the music, but it's nothing like seeing Alan in a nice theater.
And I try to express that to his management team and him to understand that your show is like you said, a 360 show. You need to incorporate all these aspects to do this truly right. You can go on stage and go play, and your music will stand on its own, and your musicians will make sure that happens. But there is something about being able to give the audience that whole great sound in a controlled environment. Speakers are just right. It looks great. Timing is good. We're controlling the old Twilight Zone or Outer Limits thing. Is we're controlling the horizontal and the vertical.
Yeah, absolutely, we are.
We are giving you everything that you should be getting for this moment. And when we release it, you'll come away saying, "Wow, that was amazing." That's how the show works best.
Mm-hmm.
And
as we know, because we sit there. We can't leave after the show because everybody's filing out. We're waiting for the audience to leave. And how many people come up to both of us after the show and say that? Say, wow, that was amazing.
Here's what I love, and I totally, absolutely adore this. You may think I get annoyed with it, but I totally love when people come up and tell me how awesome the sound was, and I smile because I'm like, you know what? Yeah, he did kick its ass today. He made you have like these little oral orgasms, didn't he?
And you're doing the same with the lights. And, people just don't know a lighting board from a...
They have no idea. And I don't think that they even recognize the lights per se because it's just so integral to how the music is supposed to go. But the sound is so important for this particular show because a lot of people come to the show expecting it to be a sonic experience. It's Alan Parsons. He's known as an engineer. It's not going to suck as far as sound is concerned. And I've been with him long enough to have been through quite a few sound guys out here. Some have been better than others. Some have not. Alan knows this. I think one of the reasons I think he loves your mix is because I think you mix it more like what he expects to be hearing. Mm-hmm. And that's what works well for this show because he wants... He said something to me yesterday. He was like, he's a frustrated TV director. And I laughed about that because I was like, yep, I could see where you would be. But he likes to have the concept of having control over all aspects of stuff and yet being able to turn people loose to go do what they do well. And he only needs to make sure that they're in where he wants to be. And that's the one nice thing because he really does know audio. And he leaves you alone, and I like that.
Yeah, he hardly ever tells me anything.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm honored by that, and it makes me feel confident. I don't have to sit there and think, oh, would he like this, or not? I just do what I do, and he likes it, so that's good.
Right.
And so it's fun. So. So you went through that early period with the New York band, and then at some point things went terribly wrong, and and then it changed. So then Alan started a new band. You want to tell me anything about the transition there?
The transition was hard. The transition was I knew where one part came from, and. Like I said, I love all the guys I've had an opportunity to work with in this band, and some like brothers. The New York guys were special because again, the New York connection, but we saw a lot of this planet together. A lot of us saw a lot of first times together on this rock, and we got to experience some things. But there was some stress. There was some moments in time when too much time with each other, too much things going on at home, too many times of something not being where it was supposed to be. And it became an irritation to some. And then to expect everybody to still be, kumbaya, it didn't happen. And I think we were in Kansas City, and there was a dust up, and the dust up came with a fan base. Some people who were there for the sound check who were fans in the audience at the time during sound check. And it was loud. It wasn't pretty. It was somewhat embarrassing.
There was an argument between the band members?
It was an argument between the guitarist and the monitor engineer, and it got to be nasty. And people said some stuff in loud fashion that was embarrassing to Alan. And Alan had already been, at that point, kind of tired of the shenanigans, but willing to put up with it. But I think that was his breaking point. He pretty much thought, I need a change. But it was not an I really thought that he'd sit everybody down and tell them to grow up. And Alan went the off with their head fashion and quite literally just went, you and you are gone. Oh, and you? Yeah, you're really gone. And it became very public. It went on the internet. There was a moment in time when the battle involved some of those folks in the fan base who were in the audience. Some who weren't there but felt that they had some internal knowledge about the workings of how this all went together. Alan, again, he was like, you don't really know what's happening here, and he said some things, and they said some things, and the former band member said some things, and it spun out of control pretty bad. And there was a lot of bad blood between the New York contingent and this camp and Alan and the fan base for a minute. I mean, I think it's all, the dust has settled now, but I remember it was pretty freaking tense for a while there. Mm-hmm. And then Alan chose to make a change. We didn't do anything. I don't think we did any more shows for the rest of that year. I don't recall us getting together and doing anything after that whole thing. I think it was just too much for him, and we didn't cancel anything, but we just didn't put anything on the book.
You didn't do any shows for another year or so.
Yeah, there was time off for Alan. There was some things that made it go, are we coming back? That was my biggest concern, is how are we coming back from this? I got an itinerary that was pretty adventurous for a new band. We started in Tel Aviv, and then we proceeded to go from Tel Aviv through Europe, winding up in 2 shows in Russia with the new act. Now, we had already been to Russia with Alan prior to that, and we had been in Tel Aviv, and we had been in a few other places that we were going to play again, but this is the new act. I didn't know these guys. Not that it would have made a hill of beans whether I knew them or not, but I felt like, well, we've got some folks here that I hope understand, what they've gotten themselves into. I wasn't sure. I didn't know the quality of the skill set.
Well, the lineup then they had added Danny Thompson
and Guy
Ayres and Manny Fukurazzo.
Well, Manny
was already in the band with
Manny,
PJ
before. Right. Alistair Green, prior to Cooper. It was prior to Tyson. It was he replaced the band as he had. I remember we rehearsed in Tel Aviv. Guy had a friend who had a recording studio, and I remember rehearsing. And Danny Thompson, Thompson was a chain smoker, and me thinking, well, Steve Murphy was our previous drummer, and he was a beast, singing, banging, that kind of situation, and Danny, Danny's a phenomenal drummer. Don't get me. He's amazes me how good he is and how strong he is in the pocket. But I felt everybody, that was coming in needed to be able to be at the same level as the guy that they were replacing. And I remember we had our first break, and I took Danny out in the alleyway behind the studio. I said, "Listen, you're really good at this, but man, those cigarettes, they're going to have to go if you're going to keep up with this band." And Danny, was like, "Okay, man. Okay. I don't know who he thought I was, and I don't know who I thought I was either." But but it was hilarious because here I am telling him how to do this, and I was just like, I should have just shut the hell up. He's just fine, and he is such the pocket player. It's just so nice. A lot of what I do takes it out of the rhythm section to make it work. Because if they've got timing and rhythm, everything else falls into place. All the accents can come afterwards, but the basis foundation for the music all has to come from drums and bass, and it does. And Danny gives that to me on a regular basis. There's so many things that I do in the show that are all based around what he does. And I know that I'm following him like any other musician should be following the drums.
And he's
stage.
consistent. He plays the same. Constantly. He plays it the same every night. Because I remember when I first started working with him, I'm sitting there and I'm mixing, and Danny does a tom fill through all four toms, and you're right there with him, and hitting that fill with him with your, I don't even know what they are, some kind of flashlight things that you do. And I was like, wow, that guy really knows these songs.
and so does he.
And so does Dan, yeah. And so does
he gives it to me all the time. It's a consistency thing, and it's what I appreciate working with a great band. It's because of the fact that when a great band will always give you that steady, you will have to work. Like I was saying before about Erica, you will be able to work on the band being really consistent, but the front was always inconsistent, so it made you have to concentrate harder on working on the front and making sure you're there for that. With this band, that's never the case. This is a band that basically it gives you great right out of the box, and it gives you great every time right out of the box. Mm-hmm. They come to bring the best show that they always can. Always. Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen a day or a show where these guys are slacking in any way, shape, or form. They like to play this the same way I like to light it. Yeah, and they're like the guys. It's a pretty heavy party band, and but everybody's good about it. On the day of the show. On the day of the show. Nobody's getting high before the show or anything. I've seen some days when they've walked in and it's been a little rough. The night before was just, a little too much. The night before hurt, and, you could tell, especially when we do those, European bus runs and, they've got really big bottles of strong beer over there. Some of the Eastern European stuff that we did, and the guys were... Some of the alcohol of a different proof. Russian vodka. Oh, yeah, Russian vodka and some other stuff from some other places. And I'll tell you, honestly, I know how bad I was hurting. But I had all day to kind of get through it. Those guys, kind of woke up a couple hours beforehand and crawled their way into gig. And, but they were magic. They were, they got up, they put them on, and they did what they do. So you've been with Alan for a really long time. Then you've been through both bands, and you're still here, and you're still here. And I know why you're still here. It's not necessarily because of the money or anything. It's because you, like everybody else, enjoys being with this band. I do.
And so while you've been with Alan and past the other artists that you mentioned, you're kind of dabbling into other things, and I know you're trying to do more design work and not actually be on the road with everybody that you get hired by.
Yeah.
You've had some other issues in the last couple of years that you might want to talk about.
I had an issue that came up last May, which was a career bender. I thought it was a career ender, but it definitely bent the career. I had a medical issue where I had been seeing floaters and the flashes of lights, and they tell us about this all the time. I mean, we all, when you go to get your eyes checked, your doctor always asks you, "See any floaters in there? Do you see any flashes of light? If you do, let me know." And I always seen all that stuff. Well, I was connected to a great retinal surgeon who took a look, and he said, "Yeah, you've got a few more years left on you. You're going to be okay. You've got some things that are happening back there. We'll check it next year and come on back, and if we got to do any repair work, we'll do some more repair work." And I was like, okay, well, not knowing anything about what he's talking about. Fast forward almost a year to the day, and I'm out on the Todd Rundgren tour. We're doing the global tour, as in the old days, I'm in the crew. I'm not just the LD. I'm putting stuff up. I'm throwing boxes in the truck. I'm doing the job that I think I'm young enough to keep doing. I have a problem with my eyes, and I just assumed it was allergies. I just assumed it was dry eyes or something was going on, and it was just out of focus. So I get some eye drops, and I figure, okay, well, the eye drops, and I'll cover my eye up just in case, and let it get some rest, and I'll be okay. And I'm flying from our last show was in Cleveland with Todd. I've already got my understudy in place. He's run the show. I'm comfortable with that. I'm getting on a plane. I'm flying into the Alan tour, and I'm thinking, okay, good. But my eye is not good. It's not going well as far as I should have paid more attention. So I contact an eye doctor in Buffalo, and I said, hey, can I pop in to have somebody take a look at it? Well, what's the problem? I was like, well, my eyes are bothering me, and I just want somebody to take a look at it. The doctor says he runs a regimen of tests, and he comes back and he says, you need to have some surgery done. I was like, well, okay, I'll do that when I get back. He says, no, you need to have some surgery done now. I was like, what? No, I'm not. No, I can't. No, I'm going on tour. And he was like, no, you. And I was like, the only reason I chose you is because your proximity to the airport. I'm leaving and getting on a plane in 3 hours. I'm going
to go to Europe.
Going to Europe.
Yeah.
I am leaving and going to Europe and going to go jump on this. And when I get done with this run, I will get this taken care of. By the time I got on the plane, I sent my girlfriend, Missy, a photo of what I could see. And I took a selfie. And I said, this is what you see. And then I took the same photograph and blacked out the bottom third of the image that I sent her. And I said, this is what I see. And by the time I got off the plane, she had done enough research to know what was going on. And the doctor, she just confirmed what the doctor in Buffalo had said. It's just like, your retina is detaching, and you're going to need to have that fixed toot sweet. And, of course, being an old roadie and being a guy, listen, you just figure, you know what, I'll just keep my eye closed, I'll keep it moist, I'll keep all this other stuff. Well, little did I understand what really was going on. The retina is a membrane along the back. It's a series of receptors that your brain takes the light that comes into your head and transposes it into vision. But your retina is a membrane that is also not pliable. It is not something like like when a woman gets pregnant and her belly expands and the skin just continues to grow. Your retina does not do that. So on top of everything else, I'm nearsighted, so my eye is shaped a little more like a football, and as everybody who is as well. Stress and high blood pressure, what I do for a living, which is staring into a bunch of very bright lights in one way or the other all day long. Between the combination of things, my retina entirely detached while I was out on the road with Alan in Germany. I think we were into show 4, and I had no vision in my right eye. And I didn't realize how bad it was until we were doing a show and packed house, and I saw out of my good left eye somebody was standing there with a sign, and I turned to look, and the sign said, "Spotlights are too bright. PJ can't see. Almost fell off stage." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I looked, and I saw hair, and I thought it was Alan's daughter, Tabitha. So at the end of the show, I adjusted the spotlights, and I made sure that everything was good. But at the end of the show, I went up to Tabs, and I said, "Hey, thanks for the note about Alan." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You came up to me with a note about Alan." And she said, "No, Flo did," who is our German production assistant.
Both have dreadlocks.
And they both have dreadlocks, and all I could see was the dreadlocks. And at that point, the next day, we were in Leipzig, and I went to Flo, and I said, "Hey, can you hook me up in Frankfurt with an eye doctor so I can go see what's going on with this? Because at this point, I'm starting to get a little nervous. I'm not nervous yet, but I'm starting to get a little nervous. I can't see out of the eye, but I'm just nervous." He says, "Well, what's the problem?" I said, "Well, I can't really see out of my right eye." So Flo makes a few phone calls, and I'm standing at the desk, and I'm doing my focuses, for the show that night. And Flo says, "You and I need to leave right now." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "You and I need to leave right now, and we'll get one of these guys to do the show." And I'm like, what are you talking about?" He says, "We're going to the hospital right now. Like, there is a car outside waiting for us. We're leaving right now." In Leipzig is one of the finest ocular hospitals in the world. They are really, 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 really good at it. And this was state-of-the-art everything, not bad for, socialist medicine.
Yeah.
And I saw the doctor there who ran the same gamut of tests on me that they did in Buffalo. And he said, your retina has entirely detached. Not only that, but you have a hole in your macula. And the fluids in your eye are now leaking out of your eye. And you will be blind. And we need to work on this right now. And you won't be able to get on an airplane for 3 months. And I was like, and no, I gotta go. I gotta go home. I can't stay here. I can't be in Germany for 3 months. I gotta go. And he's saying, "No, you can't. You will lose the eye. If for no other reason, if we don't work on this now, and if you get on an airplane, that'll make it even worse."
That's a tough decision.
It shouldn't have been a decision. It shouldn't have even been I should have absolutely said, "Fine." And I didn't. I said, "I am going to go home." And he made me sign the same waiver that the doctor in Buffalo did. That said, "I've been told, I understand, and I am choosing to go another direction." And on the ride back from the hospital, I realized that I will probably never do this again. It was hard. I walked in. I remember how I felt, and to this minute, it hits me the same way it did then. I remember walking into the dressing room now, and Lisa and Tabitha that were there, and we all cried. Mm-hmm. It scares me how close I got. I have no idea. As guy as I am, as male as I am, there's a point when I'm not the smartest, the smartest pig in the pen.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to your own well-being, huh?
Right. The fact that Alan and Lisa held me like I was their child and cried with me. It wasn't going to be all right. It was not going to be all right. There was a strong probability I was never going to have my vision again, and I didn't know where I was going to be. I had no idea. My career was over in my head at that point. They made sure I had a flight home. The bus ride to Frankfurt that night was interesting because that was a split crew band thing, wasn't it? I think that we were traveling on 2 different coaches.
Yeah.
So I didn't get to see you guys. I saw you before I left and everything like that, but then I got on the bus with the band because you guys were rolling to another location and they rolled me to the airport. And it was just surreal to me because I really couldn't see, and and every single person was telling me how great a show it had been and how amazed that they were that they couldn't tell that the show was suffering in any way because they couldn't tell that I couldn't see. Mm-hmm. And the band members were very sweet about their love for me. None of that was ringing. I mean, I was about as numb as you could get.
Sure. Devastated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not knowing what's going to go on. Not knowing any aspect of this. Not knowing, how I was going to pay for a surgery. Was there going to be a surgery? Were they just going to pluck the eye out of my head and just put a glass ball in there? I no idea. None. I didn't know anything. I got on an airplane and had flight attendants helping me around, which was really because I think, it was one of those things. It was like, he can't see. Mm-hmm. He's going to need some help, and I got off the plane and my surgeon said, can't do it today because we need your body to come back around to where you were, and then we'll get you right in. Mm-hmm. And the next day it was, this is your anesthesiologist, and this is my surgical assistant, and this is the hospital you'll be checking into, and let me explain to you how this works, and we're going to try to get your vision back. They do eye damage based on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being perfect vision and 10 being complete blindness and failure of the organ. And my doctor said that I was a 10 plus when he looked. The retina had entirely detached and had basically collapsed upon itself, and the macular hole was big enough that fluids were leaking out of it, and I was losing the fluids that float inside your eye. The surgery was weird. They put me under. On top of everything else, my surgeon is a huge Alan Parsons fan.
Oh,
he knows the music inside and out. He's a cool dude. And he's a surgeon, and he has utmost confidence in himself, and was probably the thing that saved my eye. So they wheel you in, and they're just about to put you under, and he says, "Oh, what are we going to listen to today? You know what? Put on Eye in the Sky. I want to hear that one today." And I thought he was putting it on for me, and his assistant was like, no, he likes to do that because he can time himself to where he is in the album to know where he's supposed to be in the surgery.
Oh, wow.
And then they put me out. And then they woke me up in the middle of surgery because they're supposed to. I woke up to visually seeing 4 needles in my eye and the beam of the laser as it was welding the retina back into place.
Wow.
I have 2,200 stitches in my right eye and 600 in my left eye.
Wow. Can't even imagine that there's enough room for all that in an eye.
And the fact that it's done by a human, and he's that good at it. And and then they injected a gas bubble into my eyeball to hold the retina in place while it healed, which prevented me from being able to get on an airplane or change altitude for 3 months.
Wow. And didn't you you had to sleep? You had to lay on your stomach or something for like
a week. Yeah.
Constantly, like all day long, right?
The second surgery required me but the macular surgery was a smaller series, so I needed to be face down for 50 minutes out of every hour of the day.
Wow.
So I had 10 minutes of uptime, but then I had to go back to that. And but for the first surgery, it was a week of head down in position, or not a week, but 3 days of head down. And then after that, it was sort of more or less normal life. But there's a bubble of gas in your eye. There is no vision, but there is something that your nerve endings see, and you see the bubble. You can't see anything else, but you do see a bubble.
Oh, weird.
It was very, very, very weird. And even weirder is when the bubble starts to get smaller. As fluids start to replace as the bubble shrinks and the fluids start to replace the same space, and you see the bubble just getting smaller and smaller in your line of vision until it dissipates and it breaks up like the liquid light shows that I was talking about with the door shows. The procedures were 6 months, from May until November. I had 4 surgeries, and on the right eye and 1 surgery on the left. Left was more preventative than anything else. The same thing could happen. Same head, same work, same everything.
Yeah, sure.
So he was just making sure that it was going to be.
Yeah, they are a pair.
Yeah.
In your eyes, so.
Yeah, and they work in the same machine.
So now, so after all this, and you're completely recovered from the surgeries.
I am recovered from the surgeries. I am at last. I now see my ophthalmologist every 3 months, because one of the things about this is I'm actually going to be better than I was, sort of, kind of. And it's a hard explanation, but as my vision gets better and the eye gets healthier, it actually gets stronger. So I have a new lens in the right eye. I have the macular hole has been closed to the point where it's more or less as good as it's going to get. My depth perception close up is a little rough. My center of vision is what would I play through it. They said they were pretty amazed with it, but usually you lose your center of vision. The dead center of wherever you're looking is what your macula processes, and I couldn't. I have a little black dot there all the time. The lens took care of any forthcoming cataracts from all the surgeries. It's been a series of, wow, did not know. Oh, I have a scleral buckle. It's like a belt that's around my eyeball to hold it into shape.
Wow.
That I'll have forever.
Technology, huh?
I have a Steve Austin eye.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing.
$6 million eye.
But now, so now though, you can see and you can do your job. And I wouldn't recommend lifting heavy items and letting your blood pressure get out of control. Probably, right? And
that's the thing. I've before this, it had been close to 40 years of doing that, and close to 40 years of throwing boxes, being in the truck, being the crew guy, hoisting a 100-pound light. That kind of stuff was part of the day. So now to be told, nope, stop.
Well, that's okay.
It is.
You're at the point in your career where you shouldn't be doing that shit anyway.
I'd like to believe that as well.
Yeah, you should. So. You really should be doing that. I mean, I've put pretty much a stop to that. I don't go out and load trucks or do any of that kind of crap anymore.
I kind of liked it. It was very Tetrisy. It was very therapeutic for me to be able to hop in the truck and work with the guys at the end of the night. And especially when they were like, "Aren't you the LD? What are you doing in the truck?"
Mm-hmm.
It's like helping you guys get this show out of here, you know. And I will miss that because that's part of the camaraderie and makes this business fun.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's that everybody wants to be a roadie. I am a roadie. You are a roadie. Part of being a roadie is to work with other roadies.
Yeah.
If I wanted to, I could be on the bus, shaking cocktails up and having everything all, and put on my fuzzy slippers and wait for everybody and the crew to come on afterwards. That's not me.
Mm-hmm.
It never has been. I don't play that very well. So it's difficult to get my head wrapped around. That is the direction I need to start working towards.
Yeah, you do.
I do.
Yeah, and there's no reason why you can't do that. There really isn't. So, I'm thrilled. I'll never forget that day. I remember being in that room, and I looked over, and you were gone because your console was set up right beside mine.
Yeah.
And you had been there all morning working, and then all of a sudden you were not there, and I went, "What happened to Martin?" And then Flo came and told me that, what happened. That you were getting ready to get on a plane and fly home, and I was like, "Oh, wow, well that changes things a bit,
Yeah, and you as production manager had to go into a game changer as well because it's like, well, who is going to be doing this show?
Well, we recruited the guy that was helping you, and so he knew he was your assistant, and I just came over to him. I said, "Look, buddy, you're the new LD." And he was like, "Oh, okay." He was a little, unsure about that.
Of course,
but I was like, "Hey, do the best you can."
Nobody told him he had to be listening to the show. He was the tech.
Yeah,
he had no idea.
But the guy stepped up.
Yeah,
he did a good job. I mean, considering how difficult this show is and how intense and complicated everything is. He did a good job. I got to say, he made it through it. It wasn't an embarrassment.
And that was the asymmetrical show design as well. So it was a difficult one to get their heads. I mean, Paul Smithy, got that design, and Smithy's a world class LD in my opinion. He's very, very good at this, and it took him a few days to get his head wrapped around the idea of throwing light from unusual angles to create a symmetrically asymmetrical look.
Mm-hmm.
That worked well with timing of this band, and I felt so bad for the tech on this tour because, I mean, he had to not only hang this asymmetrical weird thing and run it, but then he had to walk in the next 3 or 4 dates that you guys had and try to hang this show in places that it really didn't quite fit.
Right.
So I saw a couple of low ceiling rooms, and I saw a couple of ceilings that there were, the stages weren't so deep, and everything changed, and I was like, wow. Had I been there, we would have made the same general decision, but he had to have that on his plate on top of everything else that he had to do for the day and then do the show. Yeah. I owe him a big old bottle of brandy or something.
Well, me and everybody else that works with you is thrilled that you made it through this, and you're back, and you got the rest of your career to look forward to. So this is good.
It is good. It's good. Again, I can't thank my surgeon enough. I really can't. He has done some amazing things. I can't thank Missy enough.
I was just going to say somebody else was very helpful. Missy that time
was unfreaking believable. I mean, it's the reason I love her so much is because she is an amazing woman, and she stepped up in ways that I've never had anybody ever do that before in my life, and it's been, I'm honored to be with her.
Yeah, well, she's a great woman.
She is a great woman.
So one other thing that we kind of skipped over, and it's, I guess my fault, I didn't even think of it, but one of the big artists that you've worked with for many years, who's, big time guy, and I know you do some really great stuff for him, is Todd Rundgren. Let's touch on that a little bit before we end this.
Todd's fun. Todd is a visualist for as well as obviously a musician, songwriter, producer, etc. Todd has a vision in his head, And he has allowed me to be able to kind of walk around inside his head a little bit and then walk away with what I get from that and go off and create that. You know, when I came to working, first time I came to work for Todd was with the Todd Healing Tour, and I guess that was 2009, I think it was, somewhere around there. I think it was 2009, 2010, somewhere in that neck of the woods. He was doing the Todd album and the Healing album. And Howard Ungerleider from Rush, called me up and he was just like, "You want to go do this? We're taking lasers out on it. He's looking for an LD." And I was like, "Absolutely, sure." It was funny because on day one of rehearsals, me and the laser guy went out to get lunch. Lunch was slow. We got back 10 minutes after rehearsal was supposed to start, and Todd screamed bloody murder at us about being late, that we do not start on our time, we start on his time, and you are late, and we're like, whoa, this is truly a real dress rehearsal? Oh shit, okay, sorry. And then never spoke to us for the rest of the run.
Oh wow.
And and we did what we were supposed to do. We shot a video with this thing. We had a good, series of runs, series of shows. And Mary Lou Arnold was still the tour manager at that point. And we were at the last show, and we did the production and put it all in the truck and sent it on its happy way back to, where it needed to go home to. And I'm in my room, and I hear a knock at the door, and I open, and Mary Lou's standing there, and she says, "Todd wants to tell you something." And he pokes his head around the door jamb, and he says, "I have to tell you, that was probably one of the best tours I've ever had. That looked great, and thank you very much." And then he turned around and walked away, and I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And she looked, and she was like, "He doesn't ever tell anybody that."
Wow.
I think he liked what you did, because he really doesn't ever do that. So I kind of assumed, okay, well, if there's anything else, I didn't know his touring schedule, and I didn't know he was as aggressively touring as he does. He is out on the road constantly. That was followed by the State Tour, and the State Tour was Todd's venture into EDM, with Todd basically playing most of the music out of a computer, and he had Jesse Gresh and Prairie Prince on drums. Jesse was playing guitar, but Todd was on a platform upstage center, or more or less center stage, and playing almost everything out of a 27-inch touchscreen that he had set up, and he'd play it and sing and play guitar every once in a while. But for the most part, it was very much an EDM record, and it was kind of different for his audience, who is so used to hearing "Can We Still Be Friends?" But his true fans know how much of an innovator he is, and absolutely just absorbed this as being Todd just continuing to move forward, which is one of the things that I like about him. He is constantly going forward in his musical direction. We found out the hard way that don't hit the space bar, because the space bar sent all the tracks right back up to the top of the show, which he discovered the hard way 3 times. And certain lighting on that screen would move things.
Oh.
Oops. Certain strobing effects or certain things like that.
Yeah. Hitting the screen,
would hit the screen and cause things to trigger without him doing it, which was kind of different. A learning process for everybody involved. The tour that we did after State, which was fun, but it was unusual for his fan base, was even more so because we did Global. And Global was where he brought out DJ and 2 dancing girls and no band. And nobody, even his deep fans, had no idea what he was doing with this.
They didn't like it very much, did they?
It depends on who you talk to. If you talk to those people who really were expecting to come see a Todd tour, they were completely pissed off about this. if you talk to, again, the fan base that totally gets the idea of where Todd goes, they were like, holy crap. And the music was great. It just didn't have a band on stage. Mm-hmm. It just, and it had, the two girls that were singing background and a DJ who was basically hitting play. Mm-hmm. And Todd playing guitar or Todd being a frontman. And it was difficult for the audience to accept the no band thing. And that's where my part became very important because it was a big visual show. We had 6 towers and a riser face of video, plus lighting, and it was all ground support on towers. So it was actually a pretty. We could pretty much squeeze it into almost every place we were going. It was a very visually driven show. Music was great, and the visuals were all built around the concept of what the songs were about. But for the most part, the audience was barraged in visual sensory for the entire show because that's how it worked. Mm-hmm. That's what he had envisioned, and that's what I achieved. We took it to the next level with White Knight, which was the tour we just got done with from last year. And White Knight was the visual experience with video completely swelled up. We had a 32-foot wide by 16-foot high video wall behind the band, and then we had a 32-foot wide and 16-foot high video wall as a blow-through in front of the band. And Todd and the girls performed in front of that screen. So we created a 3D imagery thing that was very hard for some people to get because a lot of people were like, I want to see the band. And there was never a moment in time when Todd thought that the band should be seen that they weren't seen. But there was a lot of times when he did not want the band seen, and hence the design. It worked great.
So you did see the band part of it.
You saw the band when Todd wanted the band to be exposed. But there was a lot of times when Todd just needed the band to perform music. He did not need them to be able to be part of the show. They were not a visual aspect of the show in his mind. He said, the visuals, I've got 64 feet of visuals. I don't need to see the band. Mm-hmm. And it was something of an amazing experience for me because a lot of the graphics for that tour were created by my youngest son, Avery, which I was able to integrate into the show and make work for the music.
That's cool.
Yeah. In fact, I remember Avery's first time being able to actually see the show with all the graphics up, and he was pretty blown away to see his stuff that big.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. We're gearing up right now on the reunion of the Utopia tour that we're getting ready to take out in April this year. It will also be a visual experience, but it's going to be a retro video experience. Mm-hmm. We're taking it back to an interesting direction on this one, and I can't talk a whole lot about it right now, but it's going to be a little bit of what you expect to see as far as the Utopia show. It truly does have the band. Willie Wilcox is on drums, and Chasm's on bass, and Todd's playing guitar, and our keyboard player, Roger, I think it's Roger on this one. It's truly the 4-man Utopia band, and you'll get that. It's just Utopia 2018. Mm-hmm. It will be visually appealing in the way that the shows have been visually appealing lately. And like I said, it's nice to be able to kind of get into Todd's head and walk around a little bit and kind of pluck out. It's like going grocery store shopping and a cool, visuals grocery store.
So he's got a lot of ideas himself.
Well, he was one of the originators of MTV as far as the musical, concept of putting video to music. Utopia Studios was notorious for that in the late 70s or the early 70s, and him being able to create a lot of the visuals that you saw not only for himself but for other artists. Came from that. He's always been, not only a visionary for music, but also a visual guy for music.
Yeah.
So it's nice to be the visual guy for him and be able to get it right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, we're going to have to wrap it up pretty soon here because they're going to come tapping on our hotel door and kick me out.
Yeah.
But any other, like, just on the Todd thing, the thing, like, interesting that you can tell us about Todd that, won't get you in trouble?
Todd's a character. Todd is... I've always felt he was more of an introvert than an extrovert. He's very much to himself. I think that's one of the reasons I like working with him, because when he does get out there and talk about stuff, it's not very often he does it, so you really should dial in and listen.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of history in this industry, and so because he has some history and things that he's done over the years, you have to respect him for that. He's kind of fun, when we're all on the bus together, because sometimes it's him in a bus and us in a bus, and sometimes he's on the bus with us. He's terribly political.
Mm-hmm.
He's a terribly smart man. I know that he and Alan have had their moments. I know that they were together on the Walk Down Abbey Road tour and a couple other projects that they work together, and I know that they don't particularly care to have to actually have a lot to do with each other anymore.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that.
But then again, I also know that there's a lot of other artists and a lot of different genres of music who have the same exact issue.
Oh,
sure. So, it's just a case of, you can't put two queen bees in the same hive.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Alan was a perfect example of that yesterday. It was funny watching him on stage for the Hey Jude segment, and he took his position off on downstage right and kind of let Kenny take the center stage, and everybody else came around that. But Alan was taking the lead on that, including the point when they got the audience to stop to get the audience to sing. And I caught that moment when he kind of leaned in and he was like, and we should stop on the break right now. And he did get the band to stop just on T, and everybody in the audience said their part. Alan's a great director. He's a great producer, concept guy.
Yeah.
And that's why I can't see how they would have toured together, because when you put that many big brains in a room like that.
Yeah, and it wasn't just that Abbey Road tour was not just those two. There was other big name artists on that tour. I think it was Boz and Christopher Cross.
Right.
Some other people. So, it's tough when you put a bunch of headliners all on the same show.
But I think that the problem with that was more of, you can put a bunch of headliners on a tour as long as they all don't have to be the headliner. But it's Todd is boss, Alan is boss. That's two bosses in one room. That becomes
it becomes a problem.
And I guess it did. And I totally understand. I would love, to be absolutely honest with you, knowing what Todd has done with music and knowing what Alan can do with music, to see them work on a project together. I would love to see something happen where you get the Alan Parsons flavor of his lushness tied in with the Todd edge of his current music and his style. I mean, Todd's done some beautiful songs in the past couple of records that I really love, but the ones that have been the ones that have actually been like, wow, that's a badass song, are the ones that have a serrated edge to them, and they cut right to the bone. And Alan's always been that sonically lush, beautifully toned music. But man, the combination of the two, there's a hit in there.
Mm-hmm.
I know it. I could tell there would be that moment in time when people would say, you cannot ignore this. But we can all dream. So,
yeah. Well, that's cool. You've had most certainly an interesting career. Long time, which is, great. You've been doing this a long time, and you've been through all kinds of different experiences and stuff. I'm glad you're still here.
Thank you.
We're going to have to sign off now, because I know they're going to come tapping on the door and kick us out of the room.
Yeah.
I think we got to everything anyway.
It was nice. I appreciate this. It was nice to talk about what I've done over the years, and it's kind of been weird because I don't usually get a chance to talk to somebody at length about it. You talk, like I said, I talked to a bunch of roadies, and I'm at the stage of the game now where I'm trying to give them all a piece of my brain, because sooner or later somebody else is going to have to take over this world and do this. it's nice to be able to put it all out there in one shot, though. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, and we're glad to have you. So we'll sign off now, and thank you, Martin.
Awesome. Thanks, Ross.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
The Rossaround Backstage Podcast wants to thank my good friend, Tim Hines, for the original music that you are listening to now. We are currently looking for sponsors for the Rossaround Backstage Podcast so that we can continue to bring you interesting stories like the one you just heard. I can be reached through Facebook or email me at rosspallone.com. Thank you for listening.